Hey everyone, welcome to Line by Line Coding Tutorials. My name is Jonathan and today we are going over the for loop in JavaScript. Here we go, we got our for loop right here. We're going to start off in step 1, which is going to be the initialization. This is going to be in the blue right here and up here. So the initialization is just the starting point of the loop. It's nothing more than that. We have it set at 0 right now, so it's going to start at 0. If you had any other number, it's going to start at that number. For instance, if it was at 2, we would start counting from 2. It's nothing crazy, pretty easy concept to know. It's just the starting point of your for loop. Just remember, it could be a variable. For instance, right here, instead of I equals 0, you could do something like var I equals 0. But you got to remember that the scope of the variable is not local to just this right here. The scope of it is going to be outside of it as well. It's not going to be contained in this for loop. And if you don't know what scope is, or you haven't heard that term, don't worry about it. Just focus on the for loop right now and just learn the basics before you move on to that. So that's it for initialization. So let's go ahead and move on to step 2, which is going to be condition. All right, everyone, we're on step 2 right now. This is going to be the condition part of the for loop. It's going to be in the red right over here, just so you guys know. So this part of the for loop is going to check whether the statement in red right here is true or false. So if the statement is true, it's going to run whatever code you have in this do something area in between these brackets. And if it's false, it's just going to exit out of the for loop. So for instance, at the moment, we have I set to 0. And at step 2, we're going to check if I is less than or equal to 5. Well, it's 0, so it's true. So whatever code you would have in here would run. Now, for instance, if we had I is equal to 6 over in the blue, and then we move to step 2, it would be false. So we would just exit out of the for loop, and nothing in between these brackets right here would run. All right, moving on to the final step of the for loop. This is going to be the final expression. We're going to be over here in the yellow part. So this is basically the updater. Just think of it like that. So after we've initialized it, setting the start point, checking if I is true or false, we're going to move on to step 3 and update the variable I. So right now we have I++. So this is going to increment it by 1. But don't forget, there's also I minus minus. As you can see down here, it would decrement by 1. But in this scenario right here, we're going to go up by 1. So this will update the variable I across the for loop right here. And once that is done, we go right on back to step 1. And now I would be 1. Let's go ahead and jump through. We'll just go slide by slide. So right now we're just going to initialize it, and we're going to set I equal to 0. And I over here, you can kind of keep track of. I put this over here on the left so you guys can get an idea of what I is equal to at its current state when we continue to cycle through this loop. So let's go ahead and do the initialization. I is equal to 0. Step 2 is the condition. Is I less than or equal to 2? Check it over here. Yeah, it is, because we just set it. And we haven't gone through the loop yet. So now we're going to execute this console.log. And now you can pretend this window on the right down here, it's going to pop up in the bottom soon, is the browser, the console. So it would just display 0 right now. So we console.log I, and its current value is 0. So we're going to display 0. Move to step 3. Now I is incremented by 1. Now I is equal to 1. So now we're going to go back to step 2. Step 1, I should probably rename it. It's just the initialization. So we're not going to go back to step 1. It'll just be step 2 and step 3 that we reiterate over. So I is less than or equal to 2. It is, because I is 1. So we're going to console.log 1 right here. And then we're going to go to step 2, and then we're going to increment it by 1. So I is now 2. Moving back to step 2, just checking the condition. Don't forget step 1 is just the initialization. Is I less than or equal to 2? Yep, I is 2, so it's equal to it. So console.log it, and that would display 2. I'm going to go ahead to step 3 and increment it by 1. I is now 3. We're going to move to step 2. Is I less than or equal to 2? It is not. It is greater than 2 because we're at 3. So we are going to exit out of the loop and be done with it. So let's go ahead and do some coding with the for loop and nested for loop. We're going to start off with a basic for loop. We're going to go ahead and iterate through this dog names array. So let's go ahead and do for var I equals 0. I is less than dog names dot length I plus plus. Oops. I just got a new keyboard. It's one of these. It's supposed to be really ergonomic, but I really suck at typing on it right now. So I apologize if you see that on the screen. But we're going to go ahead and loop through this, and we're just going to console log each one. So we're going to do dog names I, and we're going to refresh this. And we're going to go to the console. So as you can see here, we have Maddie, Taco, and Sasha. So we're setting the variable, the initialization right here, highlighted at 0. And then we're going to be basing it. We're going to check, keep going through it based on the length of dog names. So if we do console.log dog names.length, that's going to give us 3. See right here on line 12. It's going to be 3. So you can essentially think of this as a 3, but we're just going to be basing it off dog's name.length. It's just the easier way of doing it, so you don't have to keep adjusting it. You're just going to be basing it off of the array length. And then we're going to iterate. So don't forget initialization. Then we're going to check to see if it's true. If it's true, then we're going to go ahead and console.log each name, as you can see here. Pretty simple, basic for loop. I wanted to give you an example of the variable here. So for instance, we could just take this out if we wanted to and just leave it like that, and then go ahead and do var I equals 0 up here, and I'll do the same thing. You can refresh it, still get Maddie, Taco, and Sasha. If we did something maybe like this, we do it to 1, what do you think is going to happen if we start this at 1? We're gonna skip over the 0, because don't forget, arrays are, and what I mean by starting at the 0, I'm sorry, arrays are 0 base. So this is going to be index 0, 1, and 2. So we're going to be starting it at index 1, as you can see here, because var I is equal to 1. And you can refresh this. You can see that we just get Taco and Sasha. So I'm going to do a more fun example, maybe a little bit more practical. I don't see a lot of people using the for loop to do this anymore, but you have to learn the basics to be able to go ahead. There's other ways of doing this for sure, but this is a good way to start, and it's definitely helpful to know. So we're going to go ahead and delete this. We're going to be working with this array up here, the var dogs array. So each index I have right here is going to be simply, sorry for that creaky chair, it's going to be simply an image path to a bunch of dog pictures that I have, and we're going to be dynamically creating 3 divs with the for loop. And dynamically creating divs is basically just creating it with HTML elements with JavaScript. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to do populate HTML. We're going to have this function. We're going to do var HTML elements. We're going to be setting this to a, it'll help if you make sure that this is a function too, by the way. We're going to do var HTML elements to an empty string, and then we're going to go ahead and do for var I equals 0, initialization, I is less than dogs.length. Then we're going to do I less plus, and then we're going to go ahead and do HTML elements plus equals. I'll explain the plus equals in a second. Then we're going to go ahead and do a template literal, or another name it goes by is template string. This was introduced in ES6, I believe, and it just makes it so much easier to inject JavaScript variables into HTML when you're writing it in JavaScript. So we're in a JavaScript file now. We're going to be writing some HTML, and we're going to be putting JavaScript variables, kind of injecting it in using the JavaScript in the HTML, as you can see right here. So we're going to create a simple div with a class of box. And these are just 2 backticks that you wrap them in, and then you're going to do we're going to have ID. We're going to do box. We're going to do something like box ID. You actually don't even need this right here. We're going to do box ID, and we're going to do $. This is where you can inject your JavaScript where you want. We're going to go ahead and use I, and then we're going to go close this off, and we're going to close that div off. So right here, the $, brackets, and then the I, that is going to be based off of the I in the for loop, the variable I in the for loop. So as we go through each one, this is going to be named, for instance, box ID 0, box ID 1, and box ID 2. So you'll see that in action in just a second, but I just wanted to explain those template literals so you kind of get an idea. Definitely look it up. It's super helpful, and I think it has pretty good browser support now, other than like Opera Mini or something like that. But definitely use it. Saves you a bunch of time. So right now we're going to go ahead and do exit out of this for loop right here. We're going to do var container equals document dot get element by ID, and then we have a container. Let me double check that we have that actually. Container. Sorry about that. We're using jQuery. We're going to, yep, we have the container here. Perfect. And then we're going to go ahead and do container.html is equal to HTML elements. Okay. We're going to go to refresh the page. See what we got here. Nothing. We should probably call the function populate HTML. We're going to go ahead and do that, see what we get right here. Cannot set property inner HTML null. Okay, that looks okay. Let's go ahead and check this out. All right, so I see the problem here. This is actually a pretty good example of a problem that you might run into. Notice the script right here, the testing.js. This is we're working in testing.js in case you missed that. Look where it is. We are above the container element right here. So if you notice, we're actually using var container equals document dot get element by ID container. We're trying to gain access to this. We're trying to put that in our JavaScript, but it doesn't even exist yet because our script is running before we even get down here. So what we need to do is we're going to cut that out. We're just going to put it right at the end, right before the body. We'll go ahead and refresh and see what happens. All right, there we go. We have our 3 divs. Pretty cool. So we dynamically created 3 HTML elements using a for loop. Now let's go ahead and set these images to the background of these 3 divs. So I'm going to go ahead and create another for loop just for this example. Normally you want to keep your code as dry as possible. You don't want to repeat stuff. So you would normally want to put it in just one for loop. But for this example, I'm just going to create another one just to show you. But always try not to repeat your code. We're going to go ahead and do, we're going to actually just copy this. We're going to work with the same thing. We're going to close this off. Go ahead and this whole file. All right, we can go ahead and delete that one. So we're going to go ahead and do something along the lines of document.getElement by ID. I'm sorry, that should be ID. Do box ID. Now we're going to be doing, it should be backticks by the way. Another template literal. It's going to be box ID is high. And then we're going to be setting that .style, .background image. Not web. You can't use that. Background image equals. Apologize, I had to pause the video really quick right there. Someone rang on my doorbell, but we're going to go ahead and continue right away. We're going to go into the style. So we got style.background image equals URL. And we're going to go ahead and do backticks. And we're going to be setting that as the dogs array, I believe, yeah. Document.getElement by ID .style.background equals 0. So right here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looping through this array right here. and setting this as the URL. So you'll see right here what I'm talking about when we go in. So we're going to do backticks, and then we're going to do dog I. And I believe that should work. URL. What the heck? There we go. That should be on the outside of that. All right. So let's refresh this page, and we've got some beautiful puppers right here. Sorry, I want to put the limelight on the puppers. Let me go ahead into the box. I believe it's in the box. Yeah, box. We're going to throw in a background size cover. I am not used to this keyboard at all. Background size cover, and we're going to do background repeat. No repeat. So what this does is just gonna background size cover is gonna make the dog pictures cover the entire width of the div, and then no repeat is gonna fix this right here where you can see this dog. It's gonna repeat itself multiple times because the picture does not fit in the div naturally when you first put it in. I'm gonna repeat that, and there we go. We got 3 beautiful dogs. We got the banana dog, we got the computer dog right here, and then we got cool sunglasses summer dog. Let's just call him summer dog. So let's go back and look at the code. I'm going to close this off a little bit more so we can read the code. So what we're doing right here is we're just looping over for I equals 0, I is less than dogs.length, I++. So document get element by ID. We're getting the IDs for each one. So let's do this step by step. For I equals 0, the initialization is I less than or equal to the length of dogs.length, which is 3. Yes, it is. So we're going to run this. So we're getting the element by ID, which is box ID. We're going to look right here. We have right here box ID 0 because we created them up here. Box ID 0 dot style dot background image URL dogs. We're referencing the dogs array. It's named dogs right here. I. And what is I right now? So I is 0 and then 0 because we're on the first iteration of the loop. So we're going to set dogs 0 to the URL. So it'll just place this URL essentially right here in the URL, and that's what it's going to set it. So that's what it does for each one. And that's the same thing for right here when we created the HTML elements originally. So we have backticks, template literal. We're just creating some HTML in the JavaScript. Class is equal to box. ID is equal to box. And then we have our template injection right here. I on the first iteration is 0. Second iteration is 2. Second iteration is 1. And then on the third iteration, it would be 2. So that's why we have box ID of 0, box ID of 1. You can look at the top right here, and then a box ID of 2. And this plus equals that I said I was going to talk about before, let's go over that really quick. Plus equals just increments by the amount that you have based off a certain number. For instance, let's do a quick example. Let's do something like var number equals 2. And I'm just going to throw this code in underneath, console.log number. Actually, let's leave this at 0. Might be a little bit easier. Plus equals 2. So what this is going to do, every time it iterates, every time that code runs, it's going to go up and increment that by 2. So plus equals will increment by 2. We can see that right here. I could just refresh this. 2, 4, 6. If we change this to 3, it would be 3, 6, 9. Pretty simple stuff. So that's what this plus equals is. If you don't understand what that was, or if you haven't seen it before, it's a pretty useful tool that you can use in the future. And that's pretty much the basics of for loops. Generally, you're going to want to use stuff like .maps, .reduce, and for each if you haven't heard of those when you're doing these type of iterations. But it's really important to know the basics. For loops are the absolute basics, and those those types of methods that I just explained, they build upon that. So you really want to know the for loop. And this is just one example of what you could do with it.